Boom. Welcome to a episode of Ronin's Reviews from the Cyborg One Shot. My name's Eric, or GM Duality Complex across all social medias. I'm joined, as always, by Steve, the Dragon X, and one of our awesome players from the game, Joe, or the Spice Must Joe, as they were on screen. And we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Cyborg tabletop system, what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it. We're not going to talk about the story itself so much, because we all know that I have a hard time writing things on the fly, but the mechanics.
No, we're definitely going to talk about that alligator, man.
Okay.
That alligator was vicious.
That alligator was vicious.
Sorry, Joe.
But that's where we're at tonight. So I actually like to turn this over to our players first. So Joe, what did you think about the game system? Did you have previous experience with it, or was this your first run?
So this was my second time touching the Borg system. I don't know if there's a name for the system that it goes with it, but I've run Merkborg before, and it was a lot of fun. But it was my first time actually playing either of them and touching Cyborg, and I enjoy it. I think it's really fun for these kinds of games where you're sitting down with a bunch of people to just kind of randomly do some crap. Because it's not super deep and complex, and you can kind of do anything with it, and then the tools they offer online make the game super easy to play. Beyond that, I do feel it's a game that's like super difficult, and I think that's its intent. But I have some thoughts about like long-term elements I don't know if would be appropriate for this part of the discussion.
So super difficult as in like the game itself is kind of like hard, right? Like not hard to understand the rules.
It's easy to play, but it's a churn. It definitely eats players alive.
Yeah.
The behind the scenes, not something that was discussed in the game. After my character died and I brought in a new character, that new character had 1 hit point. And there is a chance that if I fumbled any of my rolls to activate my powers, I would have dealt a d6 damage to myself. So I was literally, every time I was using a power, I was like, okay, is this it? Is this going to be the time? Am I going to blow myself up like a psyker in 40k?
So, the game definitely is a meat grinder. Surprisingly, only 1 character died in our little one shot, but that was kind of an anomaly that only 1 died. But yeah, the game is super simple. I mean, the roles are all player facing, meaning that we roll the dice, we see the outcomes. There's no fudging, there's no DM fiat. It's just what it is. If you die, you die. If you succeed, you succeed. And it's a lot of fun. I think having that contrast of a game like the Morkborg, the Cyborg, the Pyroborg, the Borg system itself, as opposed to something like Pathfinder and D&D, where you're the hero, everything you do is heroic, you're very unlikely to die. I love that contrast where this is a game where you're probably going to die. Don't get attached to your character. And then the tools that they have to make it so easy to bring in a new character. You push a button, you have a character you're playing again and around. Like it's so player friendly, so easy to run, and it's just a blast to play something where you're not the hero, like this great hero. You're just a guy and you're probably going to die.
No, I totally agree with that. I also the thing I like about all the board games, the rules fit on 2 pages in the back cover of the book. You know, a lot of complaints that we hear on TikTok and other places where we're talking about, try a game that's not Pathfinder, try a game that's not D&D, is it's so hard to learn a game. There's just too many rules. I got to read 300 page books to know what I'm doing. But with something like the Borg games, whether you're playing Morkborg, Cyborg, Pirate Borg, Duck Borg, or Orc Borg, the rules fit on the back cover. Like, it's just right there. They're ultra simple and easy to grab and go with.
Very much. I know an issue, uh I wouldn't say an issue, but a thing about that too is a lot of the friends I have that play games that are not super into playing something like Merkborg or Cyborg or whatever, to them it's the, well, I need to read the rules in the book, and the book's hard to read and navigate because it is basically a work of art at the
Yeah.
end of the day. Um and I can see that it can
Yes.
be a challenge. There's a lot of contrasts, and but the game itself is so easy to play that, like, I'm like, nah, just let me run it. Let me teach you. It's super easy.
That is something I'll agree with, and I hope they. It's one of the things, like, I wish they could do a little bit better on the interior of the book, because it can be really hard to read some of those pages, like between the fonts and the color choices. I can't remember which one it is. It might be the Vost Grimm book I have, but the page is black and the font is this kind of just like off gray. It's shiny, and you have to kind of tilt the book like a certain way so it kind of gets a glare to read it. And it's like, well, what does this say? And also, some of the fonts are just hard to read themselves, but they're stunning. Like, the artwork in the books is just absolutely stunning.
I can agree with all of that. I personally find the books to be beautiful. I think the Borg books are by far the prettiest. If not the prettiest, they're at least top 5 in like actual beauty of the book. Holding the book, looking through it is just second to none, honestly. It's so good, it's so pretty, but it is very hard to read. That's why it's good that they have all the rules in printer friendly version online. Like I said, it's very player friendly, and they have all these various tools to help you play and learn the game.
Yeah, you technically don't have to spend a cent to play this game, period. Because like you just mentioned, they're all online. The whole book is online for free. It just doesn't have the art.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, maybe not for Cyborg. For Merkborg, it is.
Yes. I don't know if I found it
Yeah.
for Cyborg, but I did find it for Morkborg.
Cyborg has a lot of the stuff you need. I don't think it has like the setting material or anything like that, but the actual rules to play and things like that are there, but just not the setting stuff. Morkborg, like you said, the entire book, you can like scroll through it on the website. It's all there. So these games are a lot of fun, in my opinion. But
Something you were starting with, Joe, was, part of long-term play, which all the board games, they have something similar into them, and that's, in Cyborg, it's the miserable headlines, where you check at the beginning of a day to see if there's a miserable headline. If you get one, that's one tick off. After 7, the world is over. Like, it's the end of the world. These games all have that kind of as a central theme. You're just barely hanging on at the destruction of whatever universe you're playing in. With that part out of the side, so that long-term aspect out, like, we don't really know how long the world's going to last. What were your concerns for long-term play with the game?
So I like to believe there's two types of games in this regard. There are games that are designed for longer play, even if they don't do it super well. And these are your D&Ds and your Pathfinders, to an extent, even your like Worlds of Darkness. The more mainstream established games, they are designed for, like, you can do years long campaigns if you want. Cyborg isn't really like that, of course. I don't think it's intended to be, but they do have the level up system, and it feels like, and I've never played it, so I can't really say, but it feels like at some point, the tone of the game completely changes. That, like, you're starting out with like 1 to 6 HP, depending on what you're playing, and then after X amount of sessions, you might have like 30 HP sitting around. So suddenly the damage that the creatures you're fighting isn't really what it used to be. The vibe would change. You know what I mean?
Yes. Now, They do have a couple enemies in the book. One of them being a mech that had 50 hit points. And then some of them they do hit pretty hard. Like that alligator that was in the sewer. The sewer gator was.
That was dumb.
That was
What, one hit he did 8 damage?
yeah.
I'm not saying dumb in a bad way. I was just like, la, alligator dead.
Yeah. And then that would have kept doing damage every round while it spun too. It is a hard system to balance encounters for, to be very, very honest. Like
I think that's part of the design though.
Yeah, that's the intent. I feel like for short-term games, the lack of encounter balance is perfectly fine. It's when you are building a long story, a long campaign that like you really want something that's going to challenge your players, but you don't want to necessarily meat grind them every fight. And I think that's the challenge of the board games. I don't think it's a flaw so much. It's the understanding that not every system can literally play everything, and it's just that kind of consideration.
That is something I found with the board games. They do tend to hyper specialize, which is a good thing in my opinion. Each one of their titles is very narrowly focused on a specific genre of play. Cyberpunk. Morkborg's got like that black fantasy, that like black death metal stuff. And then Pirateborg, Pirates of the Caribbean, but ultra dark and gritty. Which I one of these days I want to play Pirates of the Caribbean. It looks like it'll be fun. So the other thing that I did, which was a little bit different for the system doesn't care about tactics, which I liked. But I incorporated a virtual desktop tabletop, so we had something fun to look at and a place where we could all roll dice and see the results. Somebody in the Discord brought up that the system isn't designed to take that into account. So did that add anything or take away from the game? What did you feel about that?
I liked it. I think the very soft level of virtual tabletop that you use, it's not like you use the battle grid or like use turn by turn, like this is how much you can move and you can fire from this angle. We didn't really focus on that. It was literally just something to like give us a general idea of where we are, like spatial reasoning. That's it.
Yeah, I'm a very visual person. I like to have something in front of me. It's hard for me to visualize things in my head. I have like a very minor form of aphantasia, so it's hard for me to like visualize shit. So having something to see, like, okay, there's 5 enemies here, and that guy. Oh, okay. It was nice. I think the hardest part for me was like, I'm throwing the grenade. How many of them do I hit? It says you hit 3. Okay. Which ones am I hitting? Well, whichever ones you want. The system doesn't care about it. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So it was a little hard to manifest that into my brain when there's like 2 guys here, 2 guys here, 2 guys here, and a guy here. Being able to be like, oh, I throw a grenade, I'm hitting this one, and this one. Seemed a little off, but once it like clicked, it was good. That was about the only issue I had, was that, okay, so it doesn't care about tactics. Okay, I can just throw the shit and blow it up. Okay.
Breaking out of the D&D, it matters part to just, whatever I want, whichever ones I want. That was kind of the hard part. Okay.
Yeah, it's that's exactly it. Breaking out of that traditional game mentality of like, okay, this guy's here, here, and here. I have a thing that's a 20-foot radius. Can I hit all of these guys? Okay, I can only hit these ones. Being able to be like, okay, I have a grenade. I can hit 3 people. You don't really think about that kind of stuff and how hard it is to break yourself out of those, I would say, bad habits of traditional games. But yeah, that was it. It was literally trying to break the D&D mindset.
So like I came from the first RPG I ever played actually was Shadowrun, and I don't think we've ever used visual boarding of any sort, no maps, no nothing for Shadowrun beyond just like here's a map I drew of the compound so you have an idea where buildings are. But the thing about Shadowrun is Shadowrun does care about stuff like placing and ranges. It just doesn't give you clear rules on how to translate that to if you wanted to use a map. So coming from that, where a game gives a crap but gives you no tools to utilize that giving a crap, to a game that just doesn't kind of give a crap is a really nice, refreshing change in pace. It makes it very cinematic, and that's exciting.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I had. What did you guys have for me, or any points that you'd like to bring up about it?
So I had one question, really, not really a point. So you had mentioned earlier, and this because this question only manifested recently for me. You mentioned earlier that you kind of were coming up with it on the fly.
Mhm.
How much prep did you do? Did you like have an idea what you wanted everything to be going in? Did you use a generator?
So I used a generator that's in the book itself, and it gives you some really just rough outline stuff like who, what, when, where, and why. And then what's the general type of enemies that you could be facing, but it doesn't tell you how many. It gives you kind of like a rough idea of the rewards. So I'd say the total prep work for that, honestly, was about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, rolling through the generators. And then the hardest part was just picking up the enemies and going, is this going to be too meat grindery versus is this going to provide any challenge at all? This is the second time I've run the system, and the first time it was just a total cakewalk. It was a milk run. I matched the number of enemies to the number of players plus one, and that was way too easy. So this one was like, well,
Yeah.
let's amp it up just a little bit because this is what I experienced with the last session that I ran using these same enemies. So if I do this many, it should be a little bit more, but it actually turned out to be a lot more in the form of that croc.
I was thinking about it the night after we played, and that croc makes me think of like if you're playing a game like D&D or Pathfinder, and you put your level 1 party up against an ogre, and it's a situation where like if the ogre gets its hands on you, you're dead. But it's easy enough to hit, and it's got a low enough HP pool that a first level party could take it down. And I'm like, that's a pretty decent challenge. It's not like there were 2 crocs. That would have been a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's that encounter. I actually had that one in the last game I ran, and it was 2 characters. It was only 2 players, and they went first, and they decimated it before it even got a chance to attack. So I'm like, the croc will be fine. I'll leave the croc in. Let's see how see if he even gets a hit out this time. I'll just up the number of security guys guarding the guy with the briefcase this time around. And the croc was just like, chomp.
I will say, I think outside of the croc, I never felt like we were in real danger, except maybe with the police officers, but we kind of just bounced when the police showed up. We were like, yeah, we're not dealing with that. Nope. We're going to find a way to get to this taxi and get the hell out of Dodge. But I also felt like all of the people that were playing were a little bit more tactical, if that's the word. So like that last encounter with the guy with the briefcase and all of his guards and the drones, we took out like most of them before they even got to act, and it really wasn't because we were overpowering them. It's just we were very tactical. 2 of us had optical suits, so we were literally invisible. We had flashbangs to make it so they were disoriented. We just did things that were really smart playing.
Yes.
Versus like another group that maybe isn't as experienced of players as the 4 of us would have had a real struggle with it. So I think there is that level of game expertise as well. If you know like tactics and you can think a little outside the box, a game like Cyborg is going to go a little easier for you than like the people that don't have that experience or that knowledge really is. I'm trying to find the best way to say it without saying they're dumbasses, but
No,
you know what I'm trying to say.
there's a term we came up with, the regular gaming group I had for like 10 years, because we played a lot of Pathfinder First Edition for a long time because it was easy and we'd play on weeknights. We don't need a lot of prep time to do that game. And the idea we came up with is that you can calculate and factor a lot in that game. Like there are obviously classes that have abilities. Oh well, this party is well balanced versus these types of creatures, and et cetera, et cetera. But there's always an insurmountable like factor that you can't calculate with that game, and it's player mastery. Because the more player understands a system or how to play role-playing games or recognizes the through line and like how some of these role-playing games function, the more you cannot factor or prepare for that element. And I think that that's very well shown in what you're talking about. Like we use tactics, and there could have been maybe 3 or 4 more enemies, and it probably wouldn't have been nearly as much of a challenge as it could have been because tactics.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. As a good example of that is I was playing in Pathfinder back before I played 5th edition D&D, and we had a person who was playing the ninja class, and they went headfirst into a fight before any of us got to move, and then all the enemies like ganged up on them, and she died. And she's like, "Well, the ninja class sucks." I'm like, "Because you didn't play it right. Like you want a barbarian or a fighter. You don't want to be a ninja if that's the type of play you want to play. Like a barbarian, a paladin, a fighter. They could have went in there and been fine. But a ninja is supposed to wait and sneak around to get flanked. Like there's all these tactics there that you're ignoring. Like you said, you can't plan for that. You can't plan for somebody who just doesn't know what they're doing. And I feel like that's such a all borderline gatekeeping way to put it, but it's not. It's just there is a system mastery and a tabletop role playing game mastery level where the more you play, the more you learn these tactics, and the more you think outside the box and try to do things that are going to make it better. Like you said, we probably could have faced 4 more drones and it wouldn't have made a difference because of the group that we had. But like you said, another group, that may have been an extremely deadly encounter because they wouldn't have known what to do.
Or if you just didn't have the gear that you guys had, minus those flashbangs and those suits, like let's just say, you guys had 1 frag grenade apiece and flak jackets instead. I mean, you'd be able to soak more damage, but you would have had to approach that incident, like that whole thing, completely differently. So yeah. Who knows?
That's also true. Like you said, it's random. We randomly generate characters. Mm-hmm. We got lucky and we made the most of what we got. So
I think
we got lucky crap. I died.
Listen, you got the short end of the stick because he rolled dice to see who that alligator was going to hit, and none of us had more than 7 hit points. So anybody it hit was dying.
So actually, yeah, that brings up something I do a lot in games where I have people pick numbers on dice to see who's getting attacked and who isn't. What do you guys think about that? Steve, you've played in a couple games where I've done that already. Joe, this is your first time with me. How do you feel about that as a table mechanic to be in play?
I'm fine with it as long as you have a little like leeway on how you utilize it, because random attacks are fine, but if like you have one party member that's consistently wailing on a boss and it's still randomly targeting people, I don't think that makes as much sense. But generally speaking, no, that's fine. We do that a lot too. If in the Fallout game I run, if a target has 2 equally good targets, your odds, your evens, roll.
So I do typically use it just for the openers and maybe like 1 round in, just until like my video game brain kicks in and it's like, this person generated some threat. So
Yeah.
So I typically do that as well in my games. I'll randomize who's getting hit, but I have players that get annoyed with it because like I'll randomize the first 2 rounds and then the one player is like dealing massive damage. And then the guy focuses that character and he's like, "Why are you not randomizing it anymore?" I'm like, "You dealt half his health in 2 hits. You're the
Yep.
biggest threat. He's taking you out specifically. They didn't deal any damage to him in the grand scheme of things. Like, random is good for the starting, but like Joe said, if the guy, or I also will play it by the story if it's a campaign type game.
Sure.
If this guy is a main enemy of one of my players, that player's getting exclusively attacked. Like
Right.
you just have to play it by ear, but for the most part, I don't mind randomized at all.
then yeah, I think that's all I have. Besides, the game has it to me, it has a really good, easy to utilize rule system as part of my final review for it. The online tool support with the random character generators is awesome. Such a godsend for players and storytellers alike. And I would definitely recommend it as like a beer and pretzels game. Something that you have a bunch of people come over, you just want to play a game. It came out of nowhere, like, hey, what do you guys want to do? You want to try this out? Cool. Or if you had some people that canceled on your regular session, I feel this would be a good series of titles to pick up and fill in that week if people still want to play. But I'll move over to Steve to give their closeout, and then Joe, if you want the final word.
Sure.
So I'm gonna say about the same. I think the Borg games are definitely a change of pace game. I don't think they're good for campaigns. I don't think they're good for much more than like a 1, 2, 3 shot. I personally would not run them that way. However, I do at some point want to run a campaign where I get another copy of the book, and when the world ends, we burn the book, because every Borg book tells you when the world ends, burn the book. So I'm not going to burn my main copy. I might just print out a copy, but for the most part, the game is a lot of fun. It's beautifully designed. It's easy to play. You can pick it up and play it in minutes. I have nothing really bad to say other than if you don't like character death, don't play the Borg games, because you are probably gonna die. That's about it. I'm gonna give it a solid 7.5 out of 10.
Fair. I also am very much in the realm of like it's really great for short campaigns, or if you want to have a quote unquote long campaign, it's that campaign you have on the back burner until, a third of your group isn't showing up for games that night, so you can be like, all right, everyone, let's do some more Cyborg or whatever, like a living campaign concept where you just keep track of the end of days until it happens and then you start over again or whatever. There was an idea I had for a while of doing like a larger campaign, but making the meat grinder element of it still functional. And it was using Cyborg, Mercborg, and Pirate Borg, where you start off with Mercborg, and then when the world ends, even if players die, they for some reason remember the elements of their prior characters. But when the world ends with Mercborg, everyone wakes up on the shores of the dark Caribbean, and then we do Pirate Borg. And then when the world ends in Pirate Borg, everyone wakes up in stasis pods that they've been in a virtual reality simulator this whole time. And then you do Cyborg, and the game would end when Cyborg would end, and everyone would wake up in an inn, and then you cut to credits kind of thing. So I think it'd be a fun way to do a long-term campaign, but still lean into the world ending and the meat grinder elements of it. Um, just a
Like
fun
that.
idea.
I like that.
But I think even with its faults, the faults are kind of like I hate to use the term feature, not a bug. Where like the grindery elements and the inability to do a long term campaign are just they're there to keep the tone correct and keep what you want for the vibes, because much like other role-playing games like World of Darkness are more about vibes than the game themselves. I kind of feel like the board games, Cyborg especially, is 100% about vibes than more than anything else, and it definitely keeps that feeling going properly. I would 7.5 to an 8 out of 10 as well. Uh, if only because it is a like $35 book, and for me to get a game book that I'm only going to use once or twice, I'm fine with that, but the average gamer may not be.
Yeah.
A quick interjection there. Yeah, that is a little pricey for a book you're only going to use every now and then, but the rules are free online. So that is a little bit of a as long as one person gets it in your group, you could probably split it among all of you and then just pass it around. But yeah, anyway.
And that $35 is going to pay a bunch of non-AI using digital artists that are and they're also paying to use a bunch of digital tools that, in my opinion, make D&D Beyond look like child's play, because you don't need to keep track of a large list of like character tools and crap when you can just create a character, and when it dies, you click a button and you got a new one.
Yeah.
And the Merkborg rules are so integrated with the Cyborg rules. Granted, characters won't flow as easily, but you can use the monster generator from Merkborg if you want to have scientific horrors for your Cyborg game.
Yeah. And you could change out the monsters between all three titles, 4 even if you count Voss Grimm, seamlessly.
You want to put some mechs in your Merkborg game? Go for it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
But anyway, thank you, Joe, for joining us. You are one of the few players who has come back for the reviews, and that is wonderful. It's nice to have a voice that's not just Eric and I in an echo chamber. Next week, we have John from Nat Handsome Games. He will be joining us for an interview. We will be happy to have him and talk about all the stuff he has going on. This is for me, for those of you out there. There is a Kickstarter going on called The Gamers Dorkness Falls. It is the 4th Gamers movie. The Gamers Dorkness Rising is the greatest D&D movie ever created. I don't care how terrible it is. It is the greatest D&D movie of all time. Go to Kickstarter and back it so I can get this 4th movie, because I need to see this movie. I cannot live without another Gamers. I need it. And yes, this is a free publicity for them. They're not paying me for this. We have got no contact with them. I just need it because I love the Gamers movies. Anyway, thank you so much for watching us. Some of the greatest quotes of all time in my D&D games have come from those movies. But anyway, I am Steve. This is Eric. Thank you once again, Joe, and we will see you next week.
Have a good day, folks.